Howdy and welcome to Bamberger Ranch. My name is Aldo Leopold. I'm the director of the Texas A&M Natural Resources Institute, and we're going to continue our Leopold Live series here at Bamberger, continuing to talk about the 5 basic tools introduced by Aldo Leopold, the father of wildlife management. These 5 tools include cow, axe, plow, fire, and gun. And what we hope to do in the upcoming months is show you how those tools can be applied, but with very specific projects and objectives. And so with me is Dr. April Sampson. She's the executive director of Bamberger, and she's going to tell us a little bit about Bamberger and what we hope to cover in the series.
Great. Thank you so much, Roel. We're really excited to have you and your colleagues from the Natural Resources Institute back here at Selah Bamberger Ranch Preserve. And we're excited about continuing our journey into Leopold Live version 2. Like Roel said, we'll be providing more detail and more useful information regarding the 5 tools that Aldo Leopold championed. Here at Selah Bamberger Ranch Preserve, we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and our mission is landowner stewardship, outreach, and environmental education. So we have many Central Texas school children that come visit us every year for hands-on science-based environmental education lessons, and we also lead showcase tours and workshops for landowners interested in practicing restoration and good land stewardship. So we're very happy to be partnering with Natural Resources Institute, and we know that you'll benefit a lot from the information that we are going to be talking about during this new version of Leopold Live.
So let's go ahead and get started.
Great.
Hello, my name's Steve Fulton. I'm the ranch manager for the Bamberger Ranch Preserve. Today we're here to talk to you about brush management as it applies to the wildlife evaluation. If you look just behind me on the other side of the fence here, that still is part of the Bamberger Ranch Preserve. This is an area that has not seen any kind of treatment since 2011. Prior to 2011, the treatment that was afforded to this part of the property was biological treatment mainly from goats. So as you can see, it has grown up quite a bit, and the species that has really grown up to be more dominant is the plateau live oak, or Texas live oak, the live oak that's most prevalent here in the hill country. This is not exactly the condition we want the majority of our uplands, these hilltops, to be in. We prefer these areas have more of a grass cover. So what we have done, and what we'll show you soon, is an area that we have treated several times since 2011, and you can see the results of those treatments. This section, just on the other side of the fence from the previous section, has had several treatments to reduce the woody overstory and increase the grass cover that we have on these hilltops. It has been burned off twice in a prescribed fire. We've come in here with the what we call a disc cutter or a brush cutter on basically a weed eater, a steel weed eater that you've seen in past episodes. We've come in here and cut those oak sprouts. Then we've also, in the past 2 years, we've brought in a hydro mulcher, a hydraulic mulching implement that's on a skid steer, which you've also seen in past episodes. When this area that I'm standing in immediately around me was treated a little less than a year ago, and you can see that it has grown back about a foot, maybe 10 inches. So it will grow back. This stuff, to kill this, you'd have to use a chemical treatment, and we're just not going to do that for 2 reasons. First off, this is our recharge zone. This is the water that falls on this land gets into our aquifers, and I really don't want any after effects from herbicide treatment to be drinking on, or my children. Also, all these root sprouts are connected to the larger trees that are near us. So if you use a herbicide application on these root sprouts, you're going to adversely affect that larger tree that we want to keep. Now, as I move a little further away, you'll see a treatment that was hydro-mulched about 2 years ago, and you can see the difference in the growth rate with the oak sprouts. So as you can see here, these root sprouts are about 2 feet tall versus 10 inches to a foot tall. So again, this is a maintenance method of treating these areas. It's not going to kill it out, but again, we're just trying to reduce the woody cover and increase the grass cover. For 2 reasons. Again, to increase our recharge and to have these more grassy areas for more predominantly grassland species. Joining us now is Robert Edmonson. Robert is a 28-year veteran for the Texas Forest Service, and he's going to enlighten us to the effects of the winter storm and maybe in the after effects that go along with that. So, Robert, nice to have you here today.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to be here. Appreciate it.
I'm going to let you take it away.
All righty. Most of y'all have figured out that, well, we went through Snowmageddon back in February, and obviously some areas of the state were impacted much harder than other areas. I know that in my region, the area that I cover here in Central Texas, that northern Gillespie County was especially hard hit. And there were even other areas scattered throughout Kerr and Williamson and Burnett counties and whatnot. But what happened was there was so much ice on these trees that a lot of these oaks lost lots of limbs. And the calls started coming in right after the ice storm. What do we do with all of this? Well, there were 2 main concerns. Concern number 1 was, is this ice storm going to create a lot more oak wilt? And the second concern was, I've got all this brush and all these things around here. What do I need to do about it? First and foremost, the initial ice storm itself probably will not start many oak wilt centers. It was well below freezing for a very extended amount of time. When it's that cold, the little beetles, little sap-feeding beetles that carry the spores for oak wilt were not flying around. It was too cold. The fungal mats were encased in ice, so they wouldn't even have access to the fungal spores anyway. And then when we have wounds on trees, after about 48 to 72 hours, there's no longer sap coming to the surface. Therefore, it's that sap that attracts these sap-feeding beetles. So once it thawed out, or once we began to warm up, 2 or 3 days has already passed. So these wounds that were on these trees caused by the ice, they're no longer attracting to the sap beetles. Now, where the problem comes in is we want to get back out and clean up the mess. Okay, we want to cut those dangling limbs out of our trees and prune them and all of those things. And basically what we advised folks to do was, if it was an emergency situation, you've got limbs hanging on your fences, you've got limbs hanging on your structures, blocking ingress or egress. If we had those situations, absolutely deal with it immediately, but also immediately paint those pruning cuts. Now, when I use the word immediately, I mean make a cut, paint the wound before you make your second cut. It is absolutely critical to do that this time of the year, because spring is when you're most likely to start a new oak wilt infection. The fungal mats produce this time of year, the beetles are active this time of the year. All we need now is the opportunity for infection, the fresh wound, okay? So that's why we advised folks, only deal with the emergency stuff now. And then your cosmetic pruning, we want to straighten up the trees. We've got these hanging snags, all of these different types of things. Delay that until at least July. In our oak wilt recommendations, our prevention recommendations, we recommend never pruning oak trees from February through June, and always immediately paint the pruning cuts whenever you make these. Any type of paint will suffice. As far as the down materials that are around, if you want to clean that up, it's not attached to the tree, fine, pile it up and burn it, salvage firewood out of it, chip it, however you want to go about doing that. For you unfortunate souls north of Fredericksburg that have just tons and tons and tons of downed materials, leave it lay, mulch it. You know, run over it, burn it, you know, just, but it's okay to leave stuff. It really is. It provides habitat and protection for seedlings that may be trying to come up through here. But anyway, for more information on oak wilt, please visit texasoakwilt.org.
This area is this is more of a riparian area. This is closer to the creek. Just a few yards behind me is part of Miller Creek, one of the tributaries of Miller Creek. And this area had become very overgrown, very thick, with a brushy overstory and just a thick mess. And we wanted to do some selective trimming, take out mostly a lot of greenbrier or smilax, whatever you want to call it, that had grown up in encompassing trees, growing up the sides of trees, and also stuff like poison oak and grapevine. Just want to reduce that and leave of course all the larger trees like the big Spanish oaks and the big cherries and the big walnuts, and also leave some of the smaller younger trees like this hackberry to my left and this persimmon to my right, which are both very good beneficial wildlife trees. And anytime you're doing work towards a wildlife evaluation, you got to think about what the wildlife want and need. As far as a food source, these two are top notch. Now, anytime we do brush work, clearing, whether it's selective clearing or just trimming, we're shooting for those times when first off we don't have a lot of the nesting birds. Either they're already through nesting or it's prior to their nesting during the fall and winter. And also those times, so we're talking about middle of the summer, fall, winter. Those times are also times when oak wilt is less of a, I wouldn't say less of a concern, but is less likely to be an issue. But again, anytime you're doing this outside of just sub-freezing temperatures, if you have a wound on an oak tree especially, you want to paint those wounds. This clearing here, because I knew I was going to be working around a lot of Spanish oak and quite a few big live oaks, and when you're working with a big machine like that, like the hydromulcher on the skid steer, you're gonna bump into a tree now and again that you didn't want to, or you're going to knock a branch out. So I did this work knowing that was going to be the condition I was working. I did this work prior to Snowmageddon, as we like to call it, but at a time when we were at freezing or below freezing temperatures. Just to be assured that the beetle was not active and the fungal mats were not actively producing spores.
Hello everyone. We've been talking about, brush clearing and the ice storm and the amount of brush and everything that we had. And pretty much with brush, the clearing part's the easy part. It's having to deal with all the biomass that's now on the ground or now that you've cut. And in some situations, it could be very overwhelming, the amount of material that you have. Basically, you have really three options. You can burn it, you can chip it, or you can repurpose. Some of repurposing would be things like this, where you take these juniper limbs or you take other limbs, you stack them up kind of in a very loose teepee kind of a shape. This provides excellent cover for various songbirds, small mammals, reptiles, things like that. If it's too much effort to pile them up like this, you could make loose piles just put little piles down. They don't have to be sticking this high off the ground, but you could just do little loose piles. And actually, other than the wildlife benefits, you also get the added benefit of protection. If in our clearing efforts, we uncovered maybe some little seedlings, some little madrone seedlings or cherry seedlings or hackberry, whatever. By making these loose little piles like this, now the white-tailed deer and your livestock can't get into those piles and they can't eat those little seedlings. So we'll have natural regeneration occurring. Okay, as far as repurposing brush, again, we could do wildlife habitats, things like that. Another good use for downed brush is erosion control. A lot of times you can take these junipers, if you fell them, you can cut half of the branches off of the tree and then just lay that tree down on the ground, flat side down. You can take some of that brush and interweave it. You're going to make, you're making a much tighter pile. Not real loose, but it's going to be much tighter. Maybe at the top of a slope or down at the bottom of a slope. That way when water comes down these slopes, we can slow it down, spread it out, and get much better infiltration into the ground. The other thing that occurs is when we do have that soil erosion coming off of these hills, it's bringing seed with it as well. So a lot of times, over a long period of time, we can get these natural berms that are running along the contours of our hills that have the Indian grass and the side oats grama and some of these other things. Yeah, you're going to catch a lot of juniper seedlings and you're going to have a bunch of those in there, but that can easily be taken care of by coming back out. Larger materials, big logs, things like that, just lay them on the ground or maybe cut them into smaller pieces. Stack them in, if you have these gullies or these little headers that are coming down, just stack that stuff in there, big boulders, rock, anything. Mm-hmm. Again, the whole purpose of erosion control is to keep your soil. Without soil, right, we can't grow these beautiful trees. So slow the water down, spread it out, and then we're good. Now, I guess we're going to talk about option 2.
If in repurposing our brush, we do quite a bit of that here on the ranch. But as you said, with the winter storm, there's a lot of down material, and so another option is just to remove that down material through burning. Now, anytime you're setting a fire, there are precautions you need to take, obviously, but when it comes to a brush pile, what you want to think about the after effects after that brush pile is burned, and how easy it's going to be to restore that burn scar. So even before you set the fire, the things to think about for the after the fire is the size of the pile, the conditions you're burning under. We prefer a smaller brush pile, even if that means you have to have multiple brush piles to burn at once. That smaller brush pile is going to burn quicker. It's going to be easier to restore, just because you're creating less of a surface area for that burn scar. So again, your colonizing plants will be able to recolonize that more quickly. And then of course you can always add grass seed or wildflower seed to that burn scar after the fire is extinguished. As far as conditions to set a brush pile, the very best conditions is, and unfortunately we have a lot of this condition, is what I call the teasing condition, where it wants to rain but doesn't quite rain. It's more of a mist or a heavy fog. During those times, you're going to, again, the conditions are milder. There's less of a chance of that brush pile fire getting away from you and spreading and burning up half your ranch or your whole ranch. But obviously you want to have a water truck or a water tank in the back of your pickup truck, something to put out a fire if it does creep into the grass and starts to get away from you. So always have that ability to put out a fire before you start the fire. What we have found as far as getting the brush pile started with the burning process. One other thing, your position of your brush pile. We want to be far enough away from the canopy of your trees that you don't scorch that canopy. And think about your prevailing winds. Most of the time our wind's coming out of the southeast. So that southeast wind is going to push that heat to the northwest. So you want to be sure that you're not pushing that heat right into a tree and scorching it. This brush pile is not far enough away from this canopy. Before I would burn this pile, I would move it, because I would scorch the canopy of this nice lacy oak behind us. But as far as what we found is our best tool for starting a brush pile is just your pear burner. It's a propane torch. But get the one with the longest handle you can, so you can stick that in there far enough in there to get towards the center of the pile, but you're still also far enough away from the heat where you're not going to get scorched yourself. And again, start it on the side of the pile that's upwind, so that wind will carry that fire through the pile and burn it up more completely. Now, once that brush pile is burning, of course, you want to be around near it, monitoring it. So it's good to have, if you have several brush piles in a small area, you can go ahead and get them all set on fire, because you can watch them all. But always be close enough where you can monitor each brush pile that you have on fire at all times. Now, once that brush pile is burned down almost completely, but there's still a good bit of coals, maybe a little bit of fire in the center of it, we either use a pitchfork or a shovel, because you're going to have these ends of the sticks or the logs or even the vines or whatnot that you're burning that not going to quite burn up because they're on the outside of the pile. Just take that pitchfork, a longer handle, so you can stay far enough away from the heat not to get scorched, and just kind of flip that into the middle of the pile, so you burn up all that material instead of leaving short stumps behind. Oops, sorry. And then, of course, after the fire is completely extinguished, days later, hopefully right before rain, you can come in there and you can till that ash in. You don't have to. Sometimes it works better to till it in. That way you don't have such a high concentration of ash. But then go ahead and add your seed mix to it. Native grass, native wildflowers. Add that seed mix into it, again, rake it in to where it's making good contact with the soil, and then hopefully it rains.
Just a couple other things, additional things on burning. A lot of times on smaller acreage, you may not have access to a big water tank or anything like that. What I have found is very effective in fire control is take an ice chest, fill it full of water, and put a beach towel in it. That way, any embers that escape, you've got a nice wet towel there, you can beat the embers down and it won't get away from you. A couple of other things, definitely call your county dispatch before you begin burning. Make sure that your county's not under a burn ban. Never leave the piles unattended.
Correct.
And most of the rural areas throughout Texas are serviced by volunteer fire departments. So maybe write them a nice check, annually, and let them know where your property is and that you're doing burning. And you'd be surprised that maybe the response time is just a little bit faster in case we have an accident. We were talking about different ways of dealing with the amount of slash and brush that's on the ground. We talked about repurposing. We talked about burning. Another good option is chipping. Mother Nature gave us all of this stuff. Why don't we use it? Okay?
Absolutely.
And so there's various types of chippers. There's this kind that mounts on the back of a tractor. You can go rent chippers. You can also get grinders. If you got a huge amount, you can get these big giant tub grinders. But basically what we're doing is we're taking that big material and we're breaking it down into much smaller pieces that are going to decompose much faster. So all of this mulch that you create, now you can spread it out, or you can use it for trails, or you can use it on your roads, okay?
In your garden.
Your garden, around your planted trees. There's a bunch of uses for this. It's probably better to double grind it. What that means is you run the big stuff through the chipper first, and then you run it back through again. That way you're breaking it up into smaller pieces. The reason for that is if you have really big pieces and you've got a lot of that stringy bark from juniper trees, if you put that out on the landscape, a lot of times it'll mat up and water won't penetrate down through the layer. And so now you've got to go back into those areas and fluff that stuff up. We talk about putting 2 to 4 inches of mulch over your planted trees. I'd probably wouldn't go much more than about 2 inches.
Right.
Because then you want to fluff that up and everything. But it's fantastic Think of this as ultra slow release fertilizer, okay?
I like that.
It holds weeds down, it holds competition down, it keeps the soil temperature from fluctuating greatly from day to night. I mean, you could have 20, 30, 40 degree difference in soil temperature on bare ground. It helps retain the moisture. It's just, mulch is a great thing, but like everything, used correctly and sparingly.
Right.
We don't need 6 inches of mulch on the ground.
Right.
But anywhere 2 to 4 inches.
So if you leave that big pile of mulch out in your pasture from chipping up that, it's just like in your garden. It's going to retard the growth. Moisture can't get through it. It's going to retard the growth of seedlings, grass seedlings, or tree seedlings, whatever you want to grow. It's going to retard that growth. So if you do have a big pile left over after your work is done, rake it out. Like you said, rake it out to a thin layer, and it'll decompose more quickly and won't retard the growth of your beneficial plants.
One additional little point, not all of us own chippers, okay? And a piece of advice I always give landowners is if you're going to do a bunch of brush clearing, do all your cutting first. You know, it may take you 2 or 3 weekends or a month or who knows. Do all your cutting first. Windrow your piles where you have the butt ends in one direction and the foliage on the other end. And then on Friday, you go into town and you rent the chipper, and then you bring it out, and then you spend all weekend just chipping. It's much more efficient, and it's much more cost effective when you do it in that way.
Invite your friends, invite your family, tell them there's free beer, free food.
We'll feed you.
Cook them hot dogs, so then it's not that expensive, and get your work done.
Get your work done. Absolutely.
Okay, I believe we have a few questions from the audience.
Yes. My question is, if you know that there's the possibility of oak wilt in your area, should you then be concerned about using the wood chips on your landscape?
Okay. Should we be concerned about using oak, even if they came from oak wilt killed trees? The answer is no. The disease, the oak wilt disease is caused by a fungus, an organism, a living critter, Bretziella fagacearum. This fungus can only live inside the water conducting vessels of living oak trees. Okay, so if the tree was dead, even though it died from oak wilt, even if it's dead, the fungus is no longer alive. Even if we cut down a half-dead tree that's still got the fungus in it, when we run that through this chipper, we're breaking those big pieces of material into really, really small pieces. So there's a lot of surface area, so the wood's going to dry out, the fungus is going to die. It's just not going to survive those conditions.
That's good to know. So what would someone be able to do if they suspect that there's oak wilt on their property?
Okay, they suspect they have oak wilt on the property. There's several options available to the landowner. One of them, that is one of the reasons the Texas A&M Forest Service has such a big presence in central Texas. It was that disease, oak wilt, that brought us in. So you would contact your local TFS office. You could also visit the website, texasoakwilt.org. There's a Get Help tab. You can send us an email directly. I mean, it's just follow the instructions on the website and get a hold of us. You could also contact certified arborists in the area that have oak wilt experience. Certified arborists can be found on the website isatexas.com. There's an arborist search tool there. You can talk to your county extension agents, to your neighbors, because I'm sure your neighbors have probably heard of it. But there's a lot of resources out there.
Great. Apart from the resources, what are the top 2 things that a landowner can do if oak wilt is confirmed on their property?
Ooh, that's a hard question. It depends on the situation. It depends on the amount of oak wilt. I'm going to expand that to 4. okay? There's 4 ways you manage the disease, and notice I use the word manage. I want to be very clear that there is no cure for oak wilt, okay? You can't wish it away, you can't fertilize it or water it away. If you have it, it's going to be there, okay? But we look at it at a 4-pronged approach. Number 1, prevention. Always, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, okay? So that's where don't prune in the spring. Always immediately paint your pruning cuts, and then be cautious about moving around green infected firewood. Okay, the bigger pieces. The mulch I'm not worried about, it's the bigger pieces. Secondly, create diversity on your landscape. Plant other trees. The way we're going to get around oak wilt in Central Texas is we're just going to have to plant additional species.
Stick with native, right?
Stick with preferably native and adapted. I'll let you have a crepe myrtle. Okay. Crepe myrtle's not invasive, but stay with your native trees. The reason oak wilt is so devastating in Central Texas is because our primary hardwood is the Texas live oak, and it grows in interconnected root systems. That's why it's epidemic. The disease was able to reach its potential because of the conditions that we have in Central Texas. So plant other trees. If we do have oak wilt on the property, you have a couple of options. One is trenching. You get out ahead of the progression of the disease, mechanically sever that interconnected root system. Hopefully you can isolate further spreading. And then lastly, there are particular fungicides that can be injected into the tree, preferably prior to infection. Or just prior to infection. Let me rephrase that. And if you treat the right tree at the right time with the right stuff, you have a very good chance of saving that tree. So really, you've got 4 tools in your toolbox, and you're going to use different ones in different situations.
Just an anecdote. We had an oak wilt outbreak here on the Bamberger Ranch many years ago, but prior to my employment here, and what was done in that instance was not trenching. It was the use of a bulldozer, and not just the infected trees were dozed out, but a large containment swath around those infected trees were also dozed out. But similar to trenching, you're breaking that connection, that root connection underground, and that's what was done there. And knocking on some wood, it has worked.
All right, good deal.
All right, well, that was pretty exciting. Thank you for joining our session of Leopold Live. Again, we'd like to thank all those speakers and those that participated with our session. Look for upcoming sessions over the course of the next year, and our hope is to cover these very specific topics that are of interest to landowners and natural resource managers.
That's right. And I'd like to thank once again the Natural Resources Institute for coming out here and helping us provide this valuable information. At Bamberger Ranch Preserve, we hope to have our programming, including our workshops and tours, back up and running by the fall, depending on how things go. So make sure to watch for both the Texas A&M Natural Resources Institute and Bamberger Ranch Preserve on your social media channels, and make sure to check in every once in a while and see what we're up to.